If you put me in the middle of the wilderness or you put me in the middle of a commercial real estate market, I can figure it out. I can figure my way out of the forest. If you've got investments, you need to read the reports and pay attention and see what's going on in those investments. With money, I think should be paying attention right now to the office market.
This is your Real Estate Syndication Show. I'm your host, Whitney Sewell. Today, our guest is Ken Ashley. He's the Executive Director and Top 100 Producer at Cushman Wakefield. He's an Atlanta-based tenant rep broker with over $3.2 billion in lease volume represented. 25 years experience, 23-year Phoenix member of the Atlanta Commercial Board Realtors $1 Million Club. He's a founding member of the CREI Summit. You're going to hear him talk about that a little bit in these lists that he's created that have grown tremendously. I hope that you will look that up. He's going to go through a number of things that have helped him to be successful. We're going to dive into the current economic climate as well. Enjoyed hearing his take on that. He has a focus on office, and he highlighted a few things around office specifically that I bet you've not heard of before. Ken, welcome to the show. Honored to have this conversation with you and really bring out your expertise. I know the listeners are going to be excited to hear from you. So welcome.
Thank you, Whitney. It's great to be here. I appreciate it.
So I know that you've had a unique path from working in your dad's landscape architectural shop and just to becoming so successful in commercial real estate. Jump back a little bit to some of those early experiences. I do always, love hearing about some, especially when somebody was intertwined in a family business or with their father, or how some of those things shaped you to where you're at today.
Well, thank you. So Dad was a landscape architect in Atlanta for more than 40 years and did a lot of commercial projects. And he met with a lot of developers, which gave me kind of the first taste of commercial real estate. It's a pretty opaque business if you don't know what it is. And a lot of people have a friend. And so one of those guys was Brad Smith, who came into the office one day. He was a broker, tenant rep, working on a build-to-suit. And he was wearing the nicest suit I'd ever seen. He had a big smile on his face. And I said, man, why are you so happy? He said, it's real estate. It's great. He was thinking about the giant fee I think he was going to earn. So Brad, through a series of discussions with the full understanding of my father and the great support, which I always appreciate, helped me figure out my path into commercial real estate. And so finally, I got a job offer at Cushman Wakefield, which was the firm I wanted to work at. It was one of the great days of my life. It was a commission only. It's very different today. Cushman does a great job of training and support, but back then it was a little different. And the training, I think, was how to use the voicemail system. And so I went home that night and I had dinner with my wife. And as sometimes happens, I talked way too much about this exciting new opportunity. And then quietly she said, well, I have some news too. And I thought we were going to talk about the social plans for the weekend. And she said, I'm pregnant. And so I had taken a commission-only job, and I gave myself 9 months to be successful or not. And I immediately called a friend and started valeting cars on the weekends until 4 a.m, which I did for like a year and a half. And 8 months in, I hadn't made a transaction, hadn't made a bean. I can't tell you how terrible it was lying in bed, the self-doubt. But finally, something happened in the 8th month and a deal closed. And we took some of the fee from that original commission and we bought the bed frame we sleep into this very day.
Wow, that's incredible. I love many parts of that story, but it's, man, so many of us, we've had to go through that time just like that, where it's like, okay, we've got this amount of time to perform, but you're willing to take that risk. You're willing to take that step of faith. Speak to that chunk of time with you and your bride. Man, how did you all stay unified in this decision moving forward? I mean, you're 8 months in, still no income. How did you all keep going?
Well, Karen and I are married 32 years now, and I'm just so fortunate to have married a great lady that supports me in everything that I do, my crazy adventures and ideas. She believes in me, and that means the world to a guy out in the workplace and in the big world. I was excited. I mean, I had a lot of relationships in Atlanta. I didn't know what I was doing. I was when I was cold calling, I didn't know if I was scared to make the call or have someone actually answer it because I had to talk. But I'm pretty committed, and in that 8th month, when I thought about quitting, I was shaving one morning, and I remember thinking to myself, maybe I ought to do something else. But I couldn't tell my father that I couldn't make it. And so I kept after it.
Wow. That's incredible. I think you see too, just your father's influence, and even you mentioning you really cared about, obviously, and just from what you just said, you really cared about what he thought. It reminds me of, man, as I raise my sons, really all our children, but and as the father, it really matters what you say and what you think, right?
Sure.
To your children. And I know, I think even you were, you were big into maybe Boy Scouts of America as
Yep.
well,
Yep.
when you were younger. Maybe speak to that and how that influenced your career. And, if your father had a role in that too.
Being an Eagle Scout is one of the great things that's happened in my life. My brothers are Eagle Scouts. My two sons are Eagle Scouts. And I'm very supportive of the Boy Scouts of America and the movement, Scouting USA. I think it teaches young people to fail in leadership in a safe environment. Because when you're a patrol leader and you make the wrong decision on dinner, it's not the end of the world. In business, you make the wrong decision, it can have real consequences on a lot of things. So I'm a big supporter of the movement and all the troubles, the ups and downs. I think the Boy Scouts is a great thing. And the impact that it had on me was the confidence that if you put me in the middle of the wilderness or you put me in the middle of a commercial real estate market, I can figure it out. I can figure my way out of the forest, and I can figure my way out of the downturns, the upturns. The self-reliance is very important.
Yeah, no, I love that. I was in Boy Scouts as a very young boy as well, and have some great memories there, no doubt about it. You're very big and focused on the abundance mentality.
Yep.
I want you to be able to speak to that, because I feel like I don't care what walk of life you're from or what industry you're in. It's important. Like your mindset is just crucial. Speak to that and maybe how that came about.
Sure. Well, first of all, we all drink from wells that we didn't dig. And there are people who've helped us in life to get here. Brad Smith helped me, my father helped me, and many others. And so I will forever spend my career trying to repay the niceties of others to me. But I think when you wake up and you're fundamentally grateful and you're thankful, that's a great way to live your life. And an abundance mentality is really the cheat code to a happy life. And the way that materializes for me is I'm happy to be helpful to young people. And I'm certainly, if you lose your job, if I can make an introduction that is helpful without regard to what it means for me. So it's not why you do it. It's sort of like serving on a not-for-profit board. Yes, you can develop relationships, but people can sense if you're just there to hustle and work the system. You have to be passionate about that not-for-profit and their mission. But if you lead with that, good things can come down the road.
Any stories of that you could highlight as far as where you've helped others like that?
Well, a quick story. So as a young man, we went to incubators where technology companies were trying to evolve. The particular one I went to was called eHatchery in Atlanta, and I remember those young CEOs as being, all were going to be the next Bill Gates and Steve Jobs, and they were all going to transition and revolutionize the world. Frankly, it was hard to talk to them because they were so full of themselves. But there was a facilities manager there named Barbara who, and she and I became friends. I used to show up and help her set up and break down from a cocktail party that occurred every Thursdays at the Hatch, every third Thursday. So there was no way Barbara could help me, but I was happy to be helpful to her. Well, the dot-com bomb happened. She lost her job. I took her to lunch. I really leaned in to try to help her get a job. Ultimately, I didn't get her a job, but one day she called me. I'll never forget it. And I was sitting at my desk, and she said, "Hey, Ken, it's Barbara. I've gotten a job." I said, "Man, that is awesome. What do you do?" She said, "Well, I work at a company called Porsche." I said, "Really? What do you do for them?" She said, "I'm the director of real estate." And so as a result of that phone call, and for the better part of 13 years until they got bought by Volkswagen, I represented Porsche exclusively in North America. We did one Porsche Drive, the build-to-suit, $100 million project on 56 acres. I did the same thing for them in the city of Carson outside of LA. And all that came from getting to know a facilities manager at a cocktail party who really controlled no real estate at the time. So you lead with the right intention, and sometimes great things happen.
Yeah, I love the mindset of just helping others, right? It doesn't matter who they are or what they look like, just making no assumptions, right? You just never know who you really are speaking to. Ken, what about? I know you have a focus on office, but I'd love us to just dive in on some trends
Yeah.
around real estate in general, but maybe office specifically. And I know the listeners, are going to value your insights around just real estate in general and just the current economic climate. And I know maybe we'll get to some of that.
Yeah, sure. So first of all, to go macro to micro, recognize that we have a recency bias. The world is ending, or the market is terrible, and it's difficult for us as human beings to look forward. But they call them cycles for a reason. They do come and they do go. And if you can remember, in 2018, we said, retail is dead. Well, now it's flourishing. In 2020 and 2021, there were a lot of pundits that said office would never survive, that it was gone from the face of the earth. Well, they were wrong. So be careful of the latest headline and the micro trend informing your decisions. And I would talk to a lot of people. We realize that sometimes we look at commercial real estate monolithically as one big. If I talk about multifamily, well, as you know from your practice with all of the things that you've got on the West Coast, you got to talk about classes, you got to talk about cities, you got to talk about a lot of drilling in before you can make certain assumptions about an entire asset class. That being said, office is definitely in transition. And I heard a term, it's not my original term, but I've been thinking about it for about 6 months now, that people are saying the market is under-demolished. I think that's an interesting way to think about it, because there are, by the way, always buildings that are functionally obsolete. That we have been in the office market for really since World War II, creating new product that is nicer and better. And there's it started with fire extinguishers and fire sprinklers that had to be installed. And so if you didn't have them, that building was functionally obsolete all the way up till today. There's also been a lot of discussion about conversion to residential. And I think cities are finally trying to lead in that conversation about changing zoning and helping taxpayers, by the way, city officials, with incentives to convert product to something that matters. But residential conversion is not the silver bullet, because I was speaking with an architect recently, and he said, okay, I got to come in. The bay depths are wrong. They're 40 feet probably, which means you're going to have dark bedrooms at the end of a hall. The plumbing is all wrong. The electrical is all wrong. He said, really, when you take an office building and try to convert it to resi, what you're getting is a bunch of concrete on dirt. He said, I'd rather just tear it down and build it right. So I think that may be too broad of a statement for a lot of, like older buildings can be converted, but just know that's not the silver bullet. And I think the last thing I would say is the current crisis is largely a capital markets crisis. Yes, supply and demand of office space is still an issue, and there's been much discussion about flight to quality. So I won't run down that rabbit hole. But the capital markets will eventually resolve themselves, and so the pundits and the smart people with money, I think, should be paying attention right now to the office market.
Wow. I've heard somebody talk about how they just feel like office is still so dead. It's interesting. You talk about the under demolished, and it sounds like, well, there's still potentially a lot of product that is going to be demolished or will be demolished, and then there won't be as much vacancy. Is that
Well,
I guess, or where do you see it going?
it's a little bit tongue in cheek, the comment about being under demolished. But I think it's important to note that there are the weaker parts of the herd that are going to need to be called out. That's just nature. That's the way that it works. So there are functionally obsolete buildings today with low ceilings, with bad parking, with old infrastructure that may need to be demolished. But for most office buildings in the United States, once this is over, they're going to be office buildings. And what's going to happen is an economic reset of prices, because supply and demand, capitalism. If you can remember back to 2009, we had a similar discussion about office. It was a different crisis, different impacts, obviously pre-COVID, but people were wondering about some new office buildings that had been built in a community called Buckhead in Atlanta. There were 5 buildings that delivered at the same time. And I'll never forget, a national publication opined that it would take 10 years to lease up those assets. It took about 3 because if you discount enough, eventually you can get someone to take the space.
I think that's wise to look at it that way. The supply and demand, and it's going to rebalance, or the prices are going to come down, and it's going to change the way we operate in that asset class. Don't you think?
I do, Whitney. And I think the other thing is that what we're recognizing is that office is a competitive weapon to help a company get to where it's trying to go. And the idea, it's not about the space, it's about the place, it's about the community. Many smart developers are programming all kinds of events and things that are happening in these areas. I think that's great because we want to come together as a people. And by the way, we haven't changed as a species since 2020. We do still need to be together. And there's a lot of research starting to emerge that when we're totally alone, and there are some exceptions. If you're the type of personality that likes to be alone, that's okay. Or if you have a certain job title, like you're a programmer, a coder, maybe okay, that's all right. But for most people, there needs to be some mentorship. And I've been reading some articles recently about people just learning, young people, about how to be in an office. And I still think that turning on and turning off the lights is a way to demonstrate to leadership that you're in it to win it. I'm not saying it's the only way. I know we have tools, but if you flip it around and you never meet your boss in person, or infrequently meet your boss in person, I think we're beginning to see out of sight, out of mind.
Yeah, there's a lot to be said by showing up every day. I love the thinking about, okay, if you're the one turning on the lights and turning them off, that says a lot, right? I don't know that I've heard it said like that before. But speak to, just the current economic climate, what you're seeing, how that's affecting maybe office specifically, or maybe other asset classes that you're aware of.
Sure. Well, there's a lot of beta in the world right now. As you and I sit here in early September, I don't know when this will be released, but we're ahead of a presidential election, and it will resolve one way or another in November. There's obviously interest rates, and there's war, and there are a lot of things going on in the world. So the way that manifests in a lot of people is, if you're a capital allocator, you're trying to make it the smallest decision possible. People are trying to not hire. People are trying to keep their powder dry. And I'm speaking sort of broadly across the industry in the United States. There are exceptions. If you're in the battery business or the data center business, it's let's go, hurry up, build, go, go, go. But a lot of industries are trying to keep their powder dry. And so what that means is that I think people who make office decisions, people who would employ me, have 3 concerns that they're really worried about. Number one, if I lease office space, will people come? And it's a whole conversation about how I can compel people to come, or how I can incent people to come. How do if I'm going to spend all this money, will they use it? The second issue is, how much do I lease? Because you can't build a church for Easter Sunday, but you better build your office for Wednesday when people are going to be in. And the third issue that people are worried about, back to our earlier discussion, is the health of their landlord. And we have tools and processes now to do a pretty good diagnostic to make sure that when you're going to enter into your second biggest cost after labor, and a contract with a landlord for most businesses, that you can do it with some assurance, or you go in with your eyes wide open to know what you're getting yourself into.
I guess, as we keep going with that thought, like, what are your expectations over the next 6-12 months?
Well, I'm pretty optimistic. Now, you should know, if there's an Eeyore, I'm Tigger. So yeah, I look through that bias. But historically, if you look after a presidential election, regardless of which party wins, there is the resolution of some of that beta, and things typically get better in the economy. And that being said, we've been through 4 difficult years. Yes, we had a punch up in the middle in 22. You could argue that was stimulus related. I don't know how real that was, and real in terms of business. But cycles end, and down markets can't, even if we wanted it to remain this way, meaning with a lot of uncertainty in beta, it can't, it won't. So I've been saying stay alive till 25. I think that 25 to me feels better. We're going to see a lot of relief in terms of interest rate. Right now, we have a pretty mushy economy. I think we will get to more terra firma in 2025.
Yeah, and I know you created the commercial real estate influencer list, and speak to what inspired you to start that list, and just the impact you hope it makes.
Well, I appreciate the question. So in March of 2020, all of us were sitting around and there was a lot of fear, uncertainty, and doubt about the world. And I started making my buddy calls. Hey, buddy, how you doing? And what I realized is that I've been in major account sales for nearly 35 years, and I have a degree in marketing. I think a lot about how we can build our brand or our influence. Marketing, by the way, is what they think about you before you walk in the room. And so I started talking to people and thinking about how post COVID or even with COVID, we were going to, as commercial real estate practitioners, market ourselves. And whether you're a GP or a broker, we all have the same challenge. People need to know who we are, they need to build trust, and it needs to be an iterative conversation. It's a very noisy world out there in terms of marketing messages. And so when I talked to people, I started writing down the names of people that I thought were doing some interesting stuff. And then I said one day, let's just do a list. So I created the first Twitter list. At that time, commercial real estate brokers who were doing interesting things in terms of digital tools and Twitter. I was about to hit publish, and my graphic artist said, why don't you create a badge? And I said, what do you mean by that? He said, well, do something that'll make their mom proud. And so we did create a badge with their picture on there and their name. And it said they were a commercial real estate influencer, a CREI list maker. And we sent it out. We emailed everybody to say, hey, congratulations, you made the list. Here we go, unintended consequences. We were trying to help people be recognized in their communities. Well, they pushed this thing all over the internet, all over the galaxy. And so our brand quickly grew just because we were trying to be respectful of others. And so today we are at 7 lists, and each list, we have an Apple DJ model, so I don't do all the lists anymore. I'm kind of the editor in chief. We're going to publish our next list very soon, the next couple of days. It'll be a podcast list. And so that'll be our 7th list. And, it's an interesting passion project, and it led to the creation of the CREI Summit. The 4th year is going to be next week in Atlanta, the second week of September. And we'll announce the 2025 Summit. And it's been a great project for me. I've really been able to meet a lot of people I never would have met and learned a lot through this. Digital tools are evolving very rapidly. And the analogy I use is that, if I walk into a kitchen, I'm not an especially good cook. You're probably going to get Pop-Tarts out of me. But if a chef walks into a kitchen, same food, same gear, same kitchen, you're going to get a gourmet meal. So how do we create a gourmet meal using the same digital tools? That's what we're focused on.
No, that's neat. It's neat that you have the marketing background too. And it sounds like that's been very beneficial in promoting this list and how that's moved forward in a big way and just throughout your career.
So we'd like to have more folks involved. You and I in our pre-call were chatting about GPs and investors. If you're in the business of raising capital, you're in the sales business. So I hope you'll pay attention to what we're doing. And if you think that we can be helpful, come along.
Yeah, I know I've heard you mention that the only thing better than your career is your marriage. I think you said of 32 years now, and your 4 kids. Speak to the balance. I know the listeners know I talk about it a lot because I'm such an advocate for being famous at home as much as the living room as much as the boardroom. And how have you done that and managed that well?
Well, listen, there's no silver bullet. I mean, it's each and every day. They say, we need to take a shower every day. We need to renew our relationships every day and to lean in and invest. But I do believe, with respect to my wonderful wife, that, love is a choice. Love is a decision. I hear people say I fell out of love. Well, I don't believe that. I believe it's about a commitment to another individual, to your mate, spending a lot of time thinking about what their needs are first and trying to help solve and listen to. I also think a big thing that, especially I'll speak for men, that we can do is when we go home, a friend of mine has on his garage door opener the word joy. And you push the button and you change your mindset so that you would give, I love what you said about being famous at home. You give your family the same respect that you would give your most important client or your most important meeting, that you have the same energy level. Sometimes I think we go home after a rough day and we want to just discharge, but your family needs you and wants you to be present in the best way possible. And then I think the other thing is just to be present, to put the device away. If you need to go work on something, go do it. But when you're at the family meal, don't be looking at your device. It really is so detrimental to that deeply seated human need to break bread together.
Yeah, I love that. Even right away, you say it's daily, right? It's the daily actions. It's not this one big thing. It's a mindset. Even hitting the joy button, right? As you open the garage door, I love think that thought as well. Just a daily reminder that hey, and you mentioned too, treating them like your best client. Like, you may be having a bad day, but if your best client walks in the door, immediately you have a different face on, right? No doubt. That's a great thought. All right, Ken. What would you say, from your experience in commercial real estate, as many passive investors listen, what would be your best advice for them right now?
Well, from the perspective of being an investor, listen, I'm just a part timer, you know, hobbyist. So I am no expert in how to become an investor. But for me in my own world, I start and lead with a GP, and I typically only do GPLP investing. I want to keep the main thing, and my day job, my day job. So I want to partner with people who are far smarter than me. But to me, it fundamentally comes down to the individual. For the GPs that I partner with, for a lot of them, we've met. Some of them I've stayed in their homes, they've stayed in mine. We built a relationship that I think makes sense, and where there's a deep seated trust. The second thing that I want as an investor is I'm cognizant. I want to be a good LP, which means I don't over communicate, which means I actually read what you send me before I call and ask you questions. Which means that my yes is yes and my no is my no, and that we're prompt in those things. But what I want in return is give me the bad news right away. Bad news kept just stinks. And years ago, I had a bad experience with someone where a project was going wrong, and they shut down on me. And that's just the death knell, as you can imagine, being an investor. So that's why I work so hard in the relationships with people. Once I find people that I like, that I trust, even if a deal isn't perfect, if it's a single or a double instead of a home run, it's okay. I want to keep going and keep working on that relationship and doing it again and again. So my goal isn't to have, 30 GPs that I do business with. It's a handful or two.
Is now a good time to invest, and why?
I think in general, I'm sort of yellow light on a lot of things. I just want to be careful about what the vision looks like. We are looking at a couple of things that make sense because they're deal specific. There's something related to someone that is selling something at a right point in their life, or there's some underlying financing that's in place that makes sense. But I would say in general, now is more of a time to mark time than to forward march. But things can change quickly. Let's see what happens in the election, and see what happens when the Fed meets on the Mount and makes the decision.
What are some habits you're disciplined about, Ken, that have produced a high return for you?
Well, understanding that I'm not the person doing the work. I think the thing is for me is to keep everything balanced. And I had a challenge, and not to plug, but I'll just tell you something that's really worked for me. I had a challenge, and actually heard on Chris Powers' podcast a way to solve this, and that is, when you get your stock investing and you pull up your app, and you can see what you're worth every day, and you can see everything that's happening in real time. Well, in alternative investments, it's a lot harder because you always got the book value, and it's hard to track everything, return on versus return of. So there's something called Arch Labs that we've started using, and loading everything in there. I think one of the keys is a friend of mine calls it, you got to look at the cattle. And what he means by that is, if you've got investments, you need to read the reports and pay attention and see what's going on in those investments. It's tempting to always look for the next one, the next new cow, but you got to put on your cowboy hat and ride around and look at the existing cattle and make sure that they're performing. And then lastly, I try to track skins on the wall to mean, what are your wins, and is there a wall of shame? Hopefully, right now, fortunately, we don't have any of that, but we will eventually have something that goes wrong, and tracking that and deconstructing it, and as best you can. And it like I'm trying to bring my boys into this a little more, learning lessons from what went well and what didn't go well in a particular deal.
What about what's the number one thing that's contributed to your success?
What a good question. I think connecting people. I'm pretty good at connecting the dots. So when I meet someone in a social situation at lunch, I usually walk away with 2 or 3 people I want to introduce them to. And building bridges and helping people form alliances is very powerful. And in my observation, what happens when you begin to build that is there's some sinew, there's some thickness to your network that helps and supports you, and people remember you when you're helpful to them. I think the second thing is when we're in a social situation at a cocktail party, and I've learned this from politicians, I try really, really hard to do 2 things. One, I don't shoulder surf, meaning I'm not looking for the better name tag. I am focused on you. And the second is what's called the 3-minute tractor beam. For 3 minutes or so, I'm listening really hard to everything you're saying, and I'm trying real hard to remember what you have said to me and what's important to you. And if it turns out that we meet again, I'm going to do the best I can to have good recall on that. And we have some systems to take notes. And there's a guy named Harvey McKay who wrote a book called How to Swim with the Sharks Without Being Eaten Alive. And Harvey McKay bought a bankrupt envelope company in Minneapolis. And he said to his salespeople, we got white envelopes. We can't differentiate. So people don't really care what you know. They care what you know about them and what you can remember. And so Harvey developed McKay 66, which is free. You can Google it. And these were questions that his salespeople were required to ask of all of their prospects. And once they got up to, 40 or 50 of those answers in there, they really knew the prospect well. And the company went on to have great success.
Love book recommendations. I appreciate you mentioning that. I'll definitely look him up. Last question, Ken, how do you like to give back?
What a heads up question, because there's so much that we are given in this life. We do have an obligation to give back. For me, it's not for profit service. Because I'm an office tenant rep, I'll call anybody and ask them for anything, including money. I love calling and asking people for money. It actually gets me going. I'm excited about it. So serving on not-for-profit boards, and I would tell people if you're in a community, and you're trying to figure out how to give back and what to do, the first thing is to audit what you are passionate about. You talked about Boy Scouts. I serve with the Boy Scout board here in Atlanta and have for many years. But the second thing is where to serve. And Harvey McKay wrote about this as well. He says the best place to serve on a not-for-profit board if you're trying to build relationships is the governance committee, because the governance committee is responsible for evaluating new board members. And even as a very young person, if you can get on that board and build some trust, your job all of a sudden becomes to go meet with significant executives in town and evaluate them for board service. And it changes the dynamic of the conversation for you. But as I was referencing earlier, it's important that you be authentic about your passion for the not-for-profit, and you're doing it for the right reasons to serve the community. I think that there's so much need in this world, and you and I, Whitney, and your listeners, we are people who have been given so much, and we can make a difference if we will only focus our energies. When my brothers and I were little, we used to take the magnifying glass on the back in the back and burn grass with it because we could focus the sun, and that was fun as little boys. But the idea is powerful, that if you can focus your time, attention, and energy on a problem, you can solve it.
Yeah, love that, Ken. Ken, I'm grateful to have met you and had you on the show. Thank you so much. Tell the listeners how they can get in touch with you, learn more about you and your lists.
Thank you very much. Pretty easy to find. You can Google me. I'm at Ken Ashley on X, at Ken Ashley Atlanta on LinkedIn. CREI Summit will get you all you need about what we're doing there. And certainly we can connect through social media. And I'll say to the listeners, if I can help, reach out. Just put Whitney's name in the subject line, so I'll know that it came through this podcast, and I'll respond as quickly as I can.
Awesome. That is a wrap. Ken, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Whitney. Appreciate you.